project is on The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. The main character in The Catcher in the Rye is Holden Caulfield. He's 16 years old and very intelligent and sensitive. However, he's been broken by the hypocrisy of the world around him, and that has led him to become very critical and cynical. He is also uncomfortable with his own weaknesses and rarely addresses them. Other main characters include Ackley, who is Holden's insecure roommate that has terrible dental hygiene. Holden believes that Ackley made up stories about his sexual escapades and does not like him. Stradler, Holden's other roommate, is very sexually active, which leads Holden to call him a sexy bastard. He is lacking cleanliness despite being immaculate in experience, and currently pursues a relationship with Jane. Jane's a girl Holden met one summer ago because they shared neighboring summer houses in Maine. Holden admires her for both her looks and her brains, and Stradler going after Jane has strained his relationships with Stradler. Other characters include Sally, who's Holden's ex that he dated for quite a while. She's well educated, but Holden calls her stupid. Phoebe, Holden's 10-year-old younger sister that he treasures. She's a dancer and very intelligent and neat, and she's one of the few characters in The Catcher in the Rye that cares for Holden. The other character that cares for Holden in The Catcher in the Rye is Mr. Antolini, Holden's former English teacher at Elkton Hills. He now teaches at New York University, and he's a heavy drinker, but he understands Holden, and Holden looks to him for guidance. So The Catcher in the Rye is a story about Holden growing up over the course of 3 days. In the beginning of the novel, we find that Holden is expelled from prep school yet again. On the first day, Holden spends time with Ackley and Stradler before he heads to New York. In New York, he meets 3 female tourists and a prostitute. On the second day, Holden has breakfast with 2 nuns. He has an argument with his former girlfriend Sally and finally reunites with his sister Phoebe. He then attempts to spend the night at Mr. Antolini's home, but he ends up leaving after he mistakes him for a homosexual attempting to harass him. On the third day, Phoebe meets Holden again and wants to run away with him, but Holden explains that he is going home rather than running away, and the two end up visiting the zoo, where Phoebe rides a carousel. Holden explains that he returns home, and he is currently undergoing psychotherapy. The entire story is a flashback that he recounts, and he is actually improving and going to try to go to school in the fall. The 3 most memorable scenes in the novel were memorable because they show contradiction within Holden's persona of being indifferent to the world. So the first scene of Holden fighting Stradler occurred in an already tense environment. They had previously exchanged insults. Holden asks Stradler about his date with Jane, but Stradler doesn't say anything, so Holden attacks Stradler. Stradler ends up pinning him to the floor to try to get him to calm down, but Holden aggravates him by insulting him, and that ends up with Holden getting punched by Stradler. The second scene involves a misunderstanding, which results in Holden rejecting Mr. Antolini's concern. Holden respects Mr. Antolini and he goes to him for advice, but there's already a slightly tense atmosphere because he caught Mr. Antolini as he's going home. We can see this in his wife's taking off her makeup and not being pleasant to look at, as well as Mr. Holden being completely drunk and loosening his inhibitions. He falls asleep, and Mr. Antolini, patting his head when he wakes up, is taken by Holden as a sign that Mr. Antolini is a homosexual. The key point to take in here was Mr. Antolini was drunk, and he was probably trying to express his affections for Holden, as in he cares for him. And we can tell that Mr. Antolini genuinely cared for him because he's one of the few people that saw that he wanted to connect with society, but didn't have the foundations to do so. However, Holden rejects this concern and moves on, which is really sad. But as we see in the final scene of him going home, chapter 26 is the last chapter of the novel. It's a monologue, so it's different from the rest of the novel, and there's no physical events that correlates with it. And this occurs shortly after he rides a carousel with his sister. He finally goes home and recovers from his breakdown, and we learn that he is now undergoing psychotherapy, and he's supposed to go to a new school in fall. Combined with previous scenes, we see that the gaps in his persona keep on widening as we near the end of the novel. First, he finds that there is somebody concerned about him, and then here we find that he has the ability to reconnect with society. Holden was his own worst enemy in the novel. He judges everyone he meets, he antagonizes everyone he meets, and he sees everyone else as the antagonist. He is actually the antagonist for himself, and we can see that because there are people who genuinely care for Holden. His sister Phoebe, his English teacher Mr. Antolini. Holden is isolating himself, and the theme of isolation can be seen in the novel as a form of self-protection for Holden. He has a paradigm of the world such that if anything goes against it, he'll have a breakdown like he had at the end of the novel. This is caused by his circumstances as well, because most of his peers are rich of a narrow worldview, as he is himself, so it's a catch-22. If he's with his peers, then he can never connect to society because they're all self-centered. But he's too self-centered to associate with people who could break his worldview. For each of these themes, I found 2 words along with their associated quotes, and if you look at the bottom left corner and click on the comment, there is a document link with explanations for each word, as well as the quotes and the context behind all of this. So the second theme, innocence, is very interesting because The Catcher in the Rye can actually be considered a Bildungsroman, but it's very, very ironic because the protagonist's central goal isn't to mature. His central goal is to resist maturing. And we can see this in the fact that he drifts from relationship to relationship to relationships and never stay tied down. The 2 words that represent innocence can be seen with clavichord and putrid. Adulthood is another theme in the novel, and we can see this in his usage of the word phoniness to describe adults. He uses it as a catch-all for all the hypocrisy, greed, the nastier side of humanity that he sees in adults. And it's true to a large extent, but he also never examines himself. He shares a lot of these traits as adults. But the main thing in the novel is he loves kids. Kids are genuine, kind-hearted, and empathetic, and you can see this in his aspiration to be a catcher in the rye. He envisions kids in a field of rye being innocent and jumping off a cliff of adulthood, which he doesn't want. The 2 words associated with this are icicle and wolf. Mortality is a big theme of the novel as well, and it has to do with the main character's past. So death was a catalyst for his transformation into who he is today. His brother died of leukemia 4 years ago, and he grew up around the time of World War II, which was an era of unprecedented deaths. He's obsessed with death, and we can see that he espouses the value of life not being under our control and wants independence from that. The 2 words associated with mortality are row and sadistic. The final theme is conflicts between the individual and society, and this actually forms the framework for the rest of the themes. Holden goes from one person to another, continuing confused by his own pain. He thinks that they reject him, but in actuality, he's subconsciously rejecting him because forming a relationship will go against the paradigm he holds. He wants a static world where nothing's changing. And the 2 words associated with this theme are qualm and phony. So, all in all, I think that this book is completely worthy of being on the AP Literature list because it contains many deep themes that you want to use as a reference. In addition, it is a work of comparable literary merit for many of the works we have read, and it contains a unique structure that we would do well to analyze and take note of. The 3 quotes from a novel that I love the most were, "I'm the most terrific liar you ever saw in your life. It's awful." And one of the biggest reasons I left Octon Hill was because I was surrounded by phonies, and I have a feeling that you're writing for some kind of terrible, terrible fall. The first two come at the beginning where we see his worldview. He hides everything within himself. And the second one is important to me as a climax because Mr. Antolini telling Holden that shows that there is a possibility for change no matter who it is. So the book that I actually would like to recommend in conjunction with The Catcher in the Rye is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. There is no spoilers in this video, and all I'm going to say is that they share very similar themes, and the protagonists share many similarities. Both books are talking about coming to terms with loneliness, and I'll highly recommend this book because Catcher in the Rye talks about how you want to get out of loneliness. The Perks of Being a Wallflower takes that one step further. Thank you for listening.